Dr. Evian Gordon. He's the Chief Medical Officer of Total Brain. It's a Sondermind company. We'll get started. Dr. Gordon.
Thanks, Betsy. It's great to be here. So what we do at Sondermind is essentially move from, in the telehealth therapy space, move from silos to systems. So the whole space is moving from focusing on what individual access and utilization and outcomes are to bringing it all together as a personalized, holistic kind of therapy. And that's underpinned by this first international database on the human brain and all the tools and technologies and insights that come with it. So that's the segue into connecting to the brain and the spinal cord is an integrative, holistic, personalized approach.
So I'll just start it off with a question for Dr. Gordon. What do you think is the most compelling new technology in brain-body stimulation?
Well, Betsy, the brain-body inherent language of communication is a kind of electrical symphony. And the electrical, magnetic, light, and sound stimulation has literally now created a new industry of bioelectric medicine. And there are at least 10 non-invasive ways to stimulate the brain and the body, at least 5 that are implantable for more intractable problems. They're all essentially parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. And then finally, body, the vagus system, this amazing nerve that innervates every organ system we have, responsible for so much healing. And there now are implantable ways to stimulate it. And I know we at Sondermind have non-invasive ways to activate it, to enhance neuroplasticity, and to increase rewiring the brain and body, because at the end of the day, Marco, that's what it's all about. Remaking connections in the symphony that are helpful.
Yeah, I mean, this is like just really, really cool stuff and very exciting stuff, I think, in neuroscience. Dr. Gordon, with AI that's able to analyze all this brain data, we were talking about this backstage, it's at an unprecedented scale. It's crazy. How can we leverage these models to make mental health insights and make that more personalized and accessible for people?
Yeah, what a great question, Betsy. So look, I think the beauty of AI, firstly, you've got to have, it's all about data. So for us, 7 billion data points, and then having a telehealth therapy company across the country where you're getting massive amounts of telehealth information. But the scientific and the therapy converge to be able to really look at patterns of what works, in whom, what is sustainable, what is a triumph of marketing over substance versus what is genuinely driven by mechanism that lasts. And so what AI in a nutshell does, beyond this incredible kind of way of looking at analyzing the data in this massively new, powerful pattern recognition manner, is also to the opposite, to personalize, hyper-personalize what's going on, whether it's in spinal cord injury or in the brain. And in our case, we're looking at it very deeply for across the board, but also for depression.
How does depression connect the dots here? So tell us a little bit about that.
Depression is a really important dot because in all these chronic illnesses, and we work quite a bit with the American Heart Association as well in cardiac disease, 30% of people get clinically depressed. A big percentage just get depressed from having a heart disease. Now, when you're talking about more and more severe illnesses, cancer, depression is the central mental health problem of our time, and it has got a silo approach. And what I think is the future is this hyper-personalized, including genetics tests. We are currently exploring the first genetics test to predict treatment, response, and remission in depression. But in answer to your question, Betsy, it connects the dots via the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is the great healer. If you switch that on, you switch off the fight, flight, stress system. So by personalizing, by bringing in genetics tests, by bringing in non-invasive ways to calm the brain with specifically designed music and sound, there's a panoply of approaches that come together for the subtypes of depression and for depression itself. And last but not least, Betsy, is inflammation.
And
The hazards of chronic illness in the hypercortisolemia and in the killing of nerve cells and in just the horrible impact of it, you change the nature of chronic illness by massively reducing inflammation. So I think that's all part and parcel of the right solution at the right time for the right person, and start off with the least invasive.
how close are we able to detect with all this data that we have, like early signs of cognitive or even emotional decline before symptoms of this actually appear?
It's a great question. The reality is, when we've looked in the database and looked, even if you take a disorder like Alzheimer's, the premonitory signs of these disorders are there decades before. So very explicitly, there are now a growing number of tests, and of course the obvious ones are the genetics and the blood tests, but there also are some of these measures of electrical brain function and event-related potentials that look at the brain operates in a second. In 1/5 of 1 second, our unconscious brains has made a whole bunch of decisions about us, about what I'm going to say next. I mean, it just happens, right? So there are deep levels of being able to pick up nuances of what are going wrong years before these disorders occur. Like in some cases, decades. We've seen it in the heart. We've seen it in almost every chronic illness that we've seen. And that's why I think that there's that huge shift. If you just take the example of the heart, to just remove the atherosclerosis or not let it set as early as possible. So in answer to your question, it's up to decades in chronic illness that we can start to see some of the earliest signs that are getting to high risk.
So he's asking about brain mapping and like how has that changed how we understand the brain, right? And do you have comments on that?
So what's changed, what the big picture database approaches and the holistic approaches change, is that so much of science is siloed. But it's not just siloed in terms of sector, it's siloed in terms of scale. So when you look at how many people are involved at take in the brain, the genetics, the single neurons, neural networks, then systems, so sensory systems, then the whole brain. But I'll just give you one example as to how critical it is to look at the whole system. In the Brain Institute that I ran before I worked for Sondermind, just one example, somebody with Parkinson's disease, for example. I have videos of someone with Parkinson's and they can barely walk, they're shuffling along, but they stop. So there's something clearly wrong with the mechanics of the pieces of walking. But they stop for a moment and they hum and they can dance. So there are mechanisms that are going on at the whole brain level that are simply not detectable when you take too much of a silo view. And there are many other examples like that. People who can't talk but can sing. So there are insights at the macro level of the system that are fundamentally different. And then there are insights by looking at the whole system that you see lots of silo solutions as well. So there are very, very major shifts in the way we think about these chronic illnesses and about the systems from taking that whole level integrative approach.
So I have one just to kind of like as a bridging question. As we're looking at this intersection of brain and spine health and neural databases and functional restoration, what do you think is like the most important mindset shift that we can have as clinicians, researchers, patients to really accelerate our progress in this space?
Well, I'm biased, but standardized databases, because then you can see the relative benefit. Everybody claims that I call it neural epicentrism. Everybody believes their solution must be the right one. But if you standardize a database like we did, you can then see what's the comparative effectiveness and which ones are better for what situation. So I think a part of the solution is standardization. The biggest changes that have occurred, and not just in our field and in our science, has been by standardizing, you can really see what's the most impactful piece, why, and to what extent.
Yeah, I agree with you with standardization. I think that's very important.